tomorrow. So let's not.
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, as well as the African Union's agenda on silencing the guns, will take center stage at the AU Heads of State and Government sessions this weekend. The 13th and 14th extraordinary sessions will take place virtually and be presided over by AU Chair, President Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's take you there live now.
Je vous remercie tous. Merci, Excellence. Nous allons donc procéder à l'ouverture effective de la séance par le discours, l'allocution d'ouverture du président de son Excellence, M. Cyril Ramaphosa, président de la République d'Afrique du Sud,
President of the Republic of South Africa, the current chairman of the African Union, and most respectfully, I would like to call upon His Excellency to make his statement. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, Your Majesties, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Honorable Ministers, Commissioners of the African Union, representatives of regional economic communities, ladies and gentlemen. Let me welcome you once again to this 14th extraordinary session of the AU on silencing the guns. While the year 2020 has imposed unprecedented challenges on us, it has also reminded us of our fortitude and resilience as Africans. We are gathered here today, albeit virtually, to assess the progress that we have made since 2013, when we adopted the Agenda 2063 flagship project of silencing the guns by 2020. With this flagship project, we committed ourselves to the objective of creating a conflict-free continent that is stable, developed, prosperous, and capable of delivering the better life that all its people yearn for. We made a solemn declaration not to bequeath the burden of wars to the next and future generations of Africans. It was on the January 2017 Assembly that we adopted the African Union Master Road Map of practical steps for silencing the guns in Africa by the year 2020. As we gather here, we all know that the guns are not yet silent on our continent. In some areas, peace has been achieved, but considerable challenges still confront us. There are shortcomings in implementation that must be addressed urgently because they diminish our ability to consolidate peace, prevent the recurrence of violent conflict, build social cohesion, deepen democracy, and advance economic development. Peace and stability will remain elusive if we do not address the connection between security and development. These are mutually reinforcing, and one cannot be achieved without the other. Sustainable peace can only be achieved by building a just world and a rules-based international order that is inclusive and that addresses the root causes of conflict, such as poverty, injustice, and discrimination. We must condemn the acts of violence, terrorism, and violent extremism as seen in the Sahel region and that now are spreading to other parts of the continent, including in the northern part of Mozambique. We equally express our grave concern about the current situation in Western Sahara, which demands that every effort is made to facilitate the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara. We need to reaffirm our commitment to the full and successful implementation of the AU Master Roadmap of practical steps to silence the guns in Africa. As we march towards the start of trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area on the 1st of January 2021, we are mindful that its success cannot be separated from a stable and conducive business environment that is able to attract foreign direct investment. We need to address the root causes of conflict in our societies through a multifaceted approach that will require improved governance, entrenched democratic norms, respect for human rights, and the political will to capacitate our institutions. We need to address the continued exclusion of women in the economic, political, and social spheres, which renders them particularly vulnerable to violence and conflict, and which undermines the contribution they could make to finding and sustaining peace. We welcome the ongoing efforts to create a conducive environment for the effective participation of women and youth in peace and development processes. It is through political will that we will overcome. It is through political will that we, the African Union, will foster unity among the people of our continent. Yesterday, we marked the 7th anniversary of the passing of the founding father of the South African nation, President Nelson Mandela. As we continue to remember him and draw inspiration from his lifelong dedication to the African cause, it is fitting that we, who are given the privilege to lead our people, work practically to give meaning to his dream of an Africa which is at peace with itself. Let us work to realize the dreams of our forebears and ensure that the next and future generations of Africans will reap the rewards of an Africa that is at peace with itself. We look forward to your insights and perspectives on our agenda item of the day. Equally, we look forward to the adoption of concrete decisions that will enable us to emanate from these engagements with decisive measures that will take our continent forward. I therefore declare this session officially open, and I wish us all fruitful deliberations throughout the day. I thank you.
Nous vous remercions, Monsieur le Président.
We thank you, Mr. President. Before we continue, I want to carry out a pleasant duty to recognize the presence of His Excellency Ramtan Lamamra, who was a preponderant role to play during this session. I apologize for having omitted your name, Mr. Lamamra, in the beginning. The microphone is off.
Madam Abala, we can't hear you.
The microphone of Madame Lamamra is off.
Je disais tout à l'heure que
I was saying earlier on that I want to carry out a pleasant duty of recognizing the presence of Mr. Ramtan Ramamra, the High Representative, on this theme, and apologize to His Excellency for having omitted his name in the beginning. And now I would like to call upon Mr. Musa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, to make his statement.
Excellence, Monsieur Cyril Ramaphosa.
Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, the current Chairman of the African Union, Excellency, Heads of State and Government, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. We are meeting again this morning to consider a second flagship project of our organization, that is silencing the guns. This theme is in fact one of the most important projects of the African Union, which is indispensable in the realization of the aspirations contained in Agenda 2063. We made it the theme of 2020, and this shows the priority that we give to this issue, and we know that this is a long-term endeavor. In spite of the political will, the arms continue to crackle and speak across the continent and in many parts of the continent. Everywhere in the world, they have been silenced, or at least the intensity has been reduced. But in Africa, they continue to circulate in large numbers, and particularly more than in regions where they have been manufactured. Unfortunately, our continent, which has the largest number of hotbeds of tension and violence, and obviously we are aware of the realities of the damage and ravage caused by these. Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, the panorama of crisis on the African scene is very saddening. In fact, the Sahel, the Lake Chad Basin, Somalia have been shaken up by extremism and terrifying terrorism. In Libya, despite the recent progress, we know that the country has been devastated by a bloody struggle for power and all the consequences. In fact, the Sahara, Western Sahara, is still awaiting the mechanism that was established by Decision 693 of the Assembly in order to give all the necessary support of the African Union to the efforts of the United Nations in order to resolve this conflict. The Horn of Africa and in Southern Africa, particularly in the north of Mozambique, in the Delgado, where we have the instability which is going on and in violation of the constitutionalism the country. In spite of the political claims, in fact, the continent has been affected with the elections. In fact, heightened tension across the continent because we have armed violence, which cause loss in human lives and which makes the unity and national harmony very fragile. the supply of arms and the lack of control has increased all types of violence, inter-community conflict, violent extremism. In fact, we can feel it even in the rural urban areas, and all types of practice and trafficking, and which disrupts the social fabric in the African societies. Arms cause physical, material, and psychological damage and prevents and hampers any progress, whether at the individual or collective level. They, in fact, annihilate all creative energy. The first victims of this situation are indisputably the youth and women, the real levers of all social and economic development of countries. Ladies and gentlemen, is it not high time that we ask ourselves and wonder about this situation with the disastrous consequences for the countries and the peoples? When we think about it and we assess the situation, we realize that silencing the guns is only possible if, without any weakness, we deal with the root causes of the problems. And everybody knows the root causes, that is the lack of state in political and economic governance of countries, which would be translated in concrete terms into injustice, collusion, that is to hamper the progress, and also the educational system, that is the lack of basic services, corruption, and the lack of dialogue. The deterioration of climate and the natural disasters, the propagation of pandemics like COVID-19 have, in fact, had their negative impact on this situation of fragility. In fact, the states, in the accomplishment of their obligations, and with various foreign eyeing of the various resources and the countries, are the ills of Africa. Excellencies, heads of state and government, silencing the guns is possible, or is it a fatality? My conviction is that the reply to these questions is within the reach of our state, and then to deal with the causes and the leadership and the leaders of the continent can deal virtuously and effectively with it. The state, the primary sea of justice, alleviation of poverty, and then institutional mechanisms and the choice of dialogue and so on deserve to be promoted as instruments in order to avoid the use of weapons and arms. The affirmation of Africa in its sovereignty under all circumstances, and the exigency of an international cooperation depending on Africa in order to solve its own crisis, are also the preconditions for the establishment of peace and stability in Africa. These national and continental responses can be supplemented effectively by all the mechanisms and all the provisions that Africa already has, and the frameworks that we have, not only to silence the guns, but also to prevent their use as a method of resolving political differences. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, indeed, this panorama of this is not very bright. However, we need to recognize that some progress has been made. As we look at the resolution of certain crises like in the Central African Republic, West Sudan, South Sudan, in Somalia. At the doctrinal level, Africa has fought in order to increase in its own defense and security mechanisms, and also to ensure greater advocacy for greater cooperation between the nations. I would like to express satisfaction of the efforts made by the African Union through its Peace and Security Council and the A3 in New York.
Monsieur le Président, Cyril Ramaphosa, chers frères.
Mr. Chairman, Cyril Ramaphosa and dear brother, I want to commend your commitment and that of your country as the chairman of the Security Council of the United Nations, which has defended relevantly the financing of the African peacekeeping mission with statutory contributions of the United Nations. I have no doubt, as I said yesterday, that between the two flagship projects, which are the subjects of over 2 sessions of the extraordinary session, are the sine qua non condition for the success of the continent. The framework is favorable for peace and security. Once we do that, then we will encourage integration and prosperity of the continent. The building of a united Africa, which our founding fathers had dreamt of, a secure Africa, which with Africa that we want is within our reach. I thank you. We thank the chairperson of the Commission. Excellencies, distinguished participants, this has brought us to the end of the opening ceremony. Now, most respectfully, I want to hand over to the chairman of the African Union, Cyril Ramaphosa, in order to conduct the affairs of the summit. I thank you.
Good morning.